deeply.
All right, we're back live here, second segment with Brian Sooy, the author of Raise Your Voice, a Cause Manifesto, a very nice, quick book, quick read. Had a pleasure reading it over the weekend. And Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, great to be here, Tal.
Great. So we'll do a quick introduction, and to my right here, we'll start with Liz Stenselli.
Hi guys, I'm Liz Stinselli, hanging out from Salt Lake City, Utah, and great to be back for the second part of this.
Second half, great. Glad you could join us. Dan Forbes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Forbes. I am hanging out from Sarasota, Florida. I am founder of the Lead with Giants community that you can find on Google+, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. I hope you will join us. You can find out more at sort of our mothership, which is leadwithgiants.com. Good to be with you, Tal, and everybody's tonight.
So it's not Forbes.com.
No, that's my that's just a hobby I do.
Okay. It's a pretty good hobby. You're making money off of that. Brian, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Brian Sooy. I am hanging out from Elyria, Ohio, which is 28 miles west of Cleveland, because I'm sure maybe one or two other people have heard of Elyria. And I am the principal and founder of Aspire. We're a design and marketing communications firm that works with mission-driven organizations to help them create purpose-driven culture and communications.
Great. Glad to have you on here. Communication is key. And Andy Lyons.
Hey, Andy Lyons here, hanging out at the Lions Den right outside Boston, Massachusetts. And I'm really enjoying listening to Brian and the words of wisdom he has to share regarding culture and meaningful, purpose-driven business. Lots of really great info here.
Good. Glad to have you, Andy. And Brian, let's pick up on the culture aspect of that. You know, you in your book you describe 3 elements that are key to communicating, and that's having a purpose, character, and culture. Why are those 3 things so important to leadership?
I think purpose is the foundation of everything we do. A lot of organizations talk about being mission-driven, and I talk about that too, but beyond mission, mission is the doing, purpose is the being. Why are we doing what we're doing? It's the why. And if we understand why we're doing what we're doing, I think it makes it clearer then to have a set of values, deeply held beliefs that align with that purpose. And then from that flow our character, the way our values are in action. So I like to say our character is our values in action. And those things combined together is what then create our identity and ultimately our voice. It's what are we saying and how are we saying it?
So first we have to really start with who we are, what our values are, to make sure that we're aligning our values so it comes across genuine and authentic, right?
Genuine and authentic, yes. And also, if we're able to express and articulate our values in how we're communicating, and again, when I talk about communicating, for me that's design, that's interpersonal communications, and when I talk about design, those are all the touch points where anybody within and without and outside of the organization has an opportunity to interact. So it just flows through that, and that's how we then express ourselves.
So I know, talk about real quick so our audience can understand. Define for us what's a mission-driven design, because I know you mentioned that in the book.
So mission-driven design is making intentional and conscious choices about what tools, in a sense, communication tools, design tools, you're going to be using to communicate with your audience. Earlier, late in the day, I had a conversation with a colleague of mine, and we were talking about social media. And one of the questions was, will our clients want to be on Facebook? And the answer was, well, if that's where their audience is, sure, be on Facebook. But if their audience, which in this case is young adults 18 to 24. And I said, if they're any indication, like my daughter, they're not hanging out on Facebook anymore. They're on Twitter. They're on Pinterest. So it's a matter of knowing where your audience is going to be and being able to talk to them at that point.
If you're not a purpose-driven organization, what are you?
I think if you're not purpose-driven, you're, well, that's a hard question to answer. It's not that you don't have a purpose, but you may not have a purpose that resonates with other individuals.
A purpose that inspires. You know, that you are inspired as the, you know, if it's an organization, you're the leader. It's inspiring to you, and then it's inspiring to others, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. If you don't have a purpose, then there's no potential to inspire, because there's nothing noble about what you're doing. If your purpose is simply to sell a product, then once somebody buys the product, what meaning does it have for them beyond the product itself? A great example of meaning beyond product is Apple, and a lot of times it's easy to go back to them, but the first thing you think of when you see an iPhone or the earbuds, the white earbuds, you think, I'm part of that tribe too. Because if you have one, you think, I'm part of that tribe. I can connect with that person, and because I have the Apple product. So that's the purpose behind selling Apple products isn't just about Apple products. It's about what feeling and what meaning are you going to have by being a part of that whole.
Yeah, I find, though, Brian, that many leaders are very purpose-driven. They're just not value-driven. So they're purposely driven to meet the quarterly report that Wall Street will be reading, that the stockholders, shareholders, will be reading. And, of course, you never feel that with Apple or other purpose-driven, truly purpose and value-driven companies. How does one shift this state of mind? I mean, we have really run into some very difficult times, especially we have Elizabeth Warren representing the fine state of Massachusetts. She loves to focus on the banking industry. I'm not confident in those type of leaders at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they're definitely purpose-driven. And so how do you, as a leader with your Cause Manifesto, start to create a ripple effect and get more leaders behind having a more authentic and meaningful tone of leadership and creating a culture that's about the customer and about serving the world, not Wall Street or the shareholders?
And you mentioned the Cause Manifesto, and that for me is really the way to create that purpose-driven culture. The Cause Manifesto has 12 principles that I found to be common, and they fall into 4 different categories: strategic, inspirational, relational, and aspirational. So if a leader can say, here's how we're going to be strategic, because this is the cause that we stand for. Here's how we're going to be inspirational, and we're going to inspire our followers to follow us. Here's how we're going to be relational and create meaning for those followers. And here's how we're going to be aspirational and say whether it's we're going to change the world or we're going to strive for something greater than just profits. Maybe it's profits and purpose. Our profits are going to go to drive affecting poverty or affecting homelessness or affecting food banks, which food banks are one of my favorite causes. It's by taking those 4 areas and then applying the principles, I call them resolutions, within those, that I think a leader can start to build and be authentic in that way. Being social, being meaningful, those are just ways, and social isn't just about social media. The secret is it's all social. So when we shake hands, when we talk on the phone, it's building those relationships. And again, going back to relationships are part of being purpose-driven. It's not just about money, and it's not just about success. It's also about significance.
I love that. And I think any solopreneur who is watching you've got to really grab on to what Brian is saying and read Raise Your Voice and read this Cause Manifesto, because it's not, you may not have anybody to lead but the cats or dogs in your home, but you really do in your tribe, in your community, with your customers. If you can share that passion, I imagine, Brian, right, in your design elements and in how you present your packages, so to speak, if you're consulting, you can really create some wonderful leadership and meaningful experiences with your engagement with your customers or clients, right?
Absolutely. You know, depending on how big your organization is, if you're a solopreneur, you know, at one point at the beginning, you're almost only selling your personality, and people, you want people to like you. Well, we want people to like our organizations too. So your personal likability extends into your company, no matter how big it is. I like to say that a business, no matter how big it is some kind of a reflection of the leader. And I see this in nonprofits, in churches, I see this in philanthropy, and I see this in business. You know, you've got a leader who's large, lives large, is got a big personality. That in some ways is reflected in the culture, and it's reflected in the way everything happens at the business. And if you have someone maybe who's at the opposite extreme, they're timid, you know, they're not as engaging in their terms of their personality, I think that can be reflected in the business too. But businesses need to change, and as you move away from personality, you need to replace that with process. So, because the personality is not always going to be there. So, you know, these principles then become that foundation, the values, and they may not be the exact values everybody wants to have, or the principles, but I think they're a good start.
You know, Brian, one company that comes to my mind that I think really epitomizes this is Chick-fil-A. So, you know, Chick-fil-A, and I just went out here on the web while we were looking to get the wording right, but their mission statement is a lot like other fast food companies. The mission statement says to be America's best quick service restaurant. Well, that could be any fast food place. But their corporate purpose is this: to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us, to have a positive influence on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. Now, that may not resonate with everybody, and you just sort of commented on that, right? Mm-hmm. This is the purpose of this company. That may not resonate with everybody, but that purpose is taught to everyone in the company, right down to the person who hands you your chicken sandwich at the drive-up window. Mm-hmm. And it's very noticeable, especially the idea of having a positive experience. So I think they and there's many other companies. Tal, I know you're sort of a student of this, and you've been doing a lot of writing about it recently. But for that purpose to be not only on the the upper level of the enterprise, but right down to that front line.
Yeah, and I'm familiar with Chick-fil-A and the philosophy of the founder and how those values trickle down. And I remember a story being told that of when they hand you the bag of food, and you know it's our response just to say thank you, and they say it's my pleasure. And when asked about that, the founder said, why do you, even the people at the counter do that? And he says, it's because that's the way my mother taught me, or my grandmother, one of the two. And that's the reason they have, you know, if it doesn't resonate with everybody, it's also the reason they have some very, very loyal fans who will wait out overnight in a tent or in the cold to get a year's worth of free Chick-fil-A because they have a promotion like that every year. It creates loyalty and affinity when people's values align with your organizational values. That's a huge connection point.
I'd like to add just a comment to that, and I think that successful brands are about stories rather than other things. And I was just reading a story actually about it's a topic about thriving at work, and this guy is in the airline business where you don't really find great customer service. And the story was in Wall Street Journal about some of the customer service above, going above and beyond some of the things he's doing. He's very well known, just internet chats and different things. It shows one person can be an ambassador of that brand, and even though that brand, it's actually United Airlines, they're not really, they don't have a good reputation, but that person made them look good. What do you think about that?
I think that's great when one person can rise above what everybody else thinks about an organization and just want to make a difference on his own, whether that's just because that's the way that person is, or they have found a purpose in doing their job that is more than about just doing their job. They're creating a positive experience for the customer. And I think so many times we just forget it's about the customer. It's all user experience.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, what is there? We're just all creating experiences for our customers in whatever way, whether it's person to person, online, through a book. We're all just creating an experience.
And I agree with you. And I think it's actually the second part of what you mentioned. The gentleman that is a pilot felt just doing things, extraordinary things for their customers without having the airlines tell him what to do. It came out of his heart. So it's just an amazing story with that.
Sure. And I think that's important because it can take one little experience like that to really turn one person around, or maybe it's a plane full of people, about an organization, like United Airlines. I always like to remind the airlines that my trip on your flight to where I'm going and my return flight is the start and end of my vacation.
Mm-hmm.
They have a big opportunity to make a big impact on my travel experience. And what's the one thing we complain most about when we travel? Air flights,
Right.
Brian, just quickly, you talk a lot about using powerful stories to inspire and create meaning. Can you talk a little bit about how we can gauge if we're telling the right stories?
Sure. I think the most powerful stories are ones that, and let's say it depends on if it's a nonprofit or if it's a mission-driven type organization like that. The stories are going to be about the outcomes and impact in the lives of the people that they're affecting. If it's a consumer product, I think the stories are then about the consumer who's buying the product. And a great story of this is the GoPro camera. And I don't know if you own one of those. They're the little cameras that clip onto your helmet or your bike. But their entire product is about the customer creating their own story. So in the space, again, that we do a lot of work in for nonprofits or philanthropies, we like to try to make it possible for someone who wants to volunteer or donate to find an opportunity to be generous. So again, the story becomes about them and not so much about the organization. So the most powerful stories are always about the people looking inside or outside in on your organization, not necessarily the stories from inside out.
Well, great. We had a great time on the second segment. Brian, thank you so much for dedicating the time this evening to visit with us.
Sure. Well, thank you. You all ask excellent questions, and you made me think as well, so I really appreciate that.
Great, great. Well, let's, I'm going to go ahead and close here, but thank you, Liz, Dan, Brian, and Andy. Had a great time with you guys, and hopefully we'll see you on the next time. And for our audiences, it will be this is will be as a recording, so you can actually watch that later on. So thank you so much for joining us this evening.
All right, thank you.